Hello and welcome to the Daily Edit. I'm Hannah, and on today's show we're going to be talking all about periods and sex and all the little fun things that come along with that. We're going to be discussing everything from contraception to masturbation to body image and body confidence. Today I'm joined by two people I know quite well as we all met on the same college course. Please welcome Sabrina and Jennifer Rice. Sabrina has gone on to study media and journalism at Glasgow Caledonian University, and Jennifer and I are studying on the same course here in Glasgow. How are you both doing today?
Good, thank you.
I'm going to move on to our first point of discussion for today, and that is periods. Now, we all know what a period is, and many of us have experienced it before, but everyone's experience of having a period will be different. Everyone's experience will have different symptoms and it will last for different lengths of time. So, I want to ask you two, what your experience of having a period was like. When did you first get your period and what have your symptoms been like? Sabrina, I'm going to come to you first.
So I first got my period quite early. I think I was about 10 or 11. I was in primary 7, just sort of waiting to go into high school. And my period has always been very heavy, and so much so that I've had iron deficiencies because of that. And I really do feel that during my period time, I often experience low mood, and yeah, so I think that's always been a major issue for me, just how heavy my period is, although I am lucky that it doesn't last too long.
So I got my period when I was around 13, I want to say. I remember I got it came in different stages, so I got like a little one at the start and I was like, oh god, like this isn't a period, I'm not old enough, I'm not getting this. I kind of panicked. I thought like, oh, I can't tell anyone, this is really embarrassing. Like there was days I was like, I didn't want to ask my mum for pads, so I had to just like work with what I had, you know what I mean? Obviously I have learned to deal with it now, but I used to get like really light periods, wasn't really an issue for me up until about 2 years ago, and then it got really, really heavy, and like I started to get really dizzy when I was standing up, and like I found it so difficult to get out of bed, so that's why like going on the pill made it a lot easier to cope, because obviously I don't get periods as regularly anymore.
So for me, my periods probably started when I was about maybe 12 or 13. I can't remember exactly how old, but I remember the day it happened. So I'd been down visiting my grandparents in Cornwall. You know, we'd got back to like the station, and like I'd been to the toilet when I got to the station and there was nothing. But then by the time I went to bed later that night, which could have only been a couple of hours later, that's when I noticed like I got my period, like just before I went to bed. My mum prior to this had given me like a couple of different pads, you know, just in case, but we hadn't really sort of discussed it, like what would happen. And I didn't really know a huge amount about like what my period was going to be like. So I went through to like the living room with like 2 different thickness of pads and basically like asked my mum like which one. And obviously like then my like parents knew that I got my period. And then it was like in the morning, like I woke up and there was just like so much blood in this pad. And I'm not a huge fan of blood anyway. Can't really deal with it. And my periods have also never really been super heavy. I say they're fairly light. I sometimes obviously get cramps every now and again and other different symptoms. But I'd say like mine's not too bad. Like I can definitely cope with it. I know there's some people out there who obviously get like super heavy periods and like they can't get out of bed and it just kind of like drains them. Now I thought that we could move on to the topic of contraception. You know, we all use contraception in some form. And it can also affect our periods too. So I have a small list here of some of the different types of contraception available. So, for example, we obviously have condoms. You've got the combined pill, and you've also got the progesterone-only pill. You've got the implant. You've also got the injection. There's a UIS and a UID. There's also the patch. You can also get a vaginal ring, as well as diaphragms and caps. I want to ask you, which of these have you used and what were your experiences of using them?
I have always been in a long distance relationship with my boyfriend, and it's the only boyfriend I've ever had. So for for that reason, the main birth control that I use is condoms. I have thought about other forms before, and I think I am kind of a bit apprehensive, just because of somebody who has struggled with her mental health. I also have some other health conditions that can be affected by many forms of contraception. So I would be kind of looking towards a non-hormonal form. I am actually planning to go on some kind of form of contraception soon, because I'll be going on Roaccutane, and to go on that you have to be on some kind of contraception other than condoms. So I'm looking towards the copper coil, due to how long it lasts and the fact that it is non-hormonal. Yeah.
Jennifer?
So obviously condoms and the progesterone only pill. Yeah, I've got really bad migraines, so whenever I went to the doctor about like stopping my period and like obviously I got into a relationship, she said that one would be best for me. So I know a lot of people have difficulty with hormones and stuff going on the pill. I've never really experienced any issues. Maybe at the start when I first started taking it, it didn't mix well with my iron pill, so sometimes it made me sick, and I was a bit worried about obviously throwing up and then it not being like it not working or whatever. But other than that, I've been taking that almost every day for about a year now, and I've never had any issues with it.
So I've obviously used condoms with any partners that I've been with, but I've also been on the combined pill. I've gotten on well with condoms, like they've never broken on me, I've never had like any issues, but the combined pill was a completely different story. I got on well with it like in the beginning, but towards the end it actually resulted in me having to go to A&E. My periods were never regular when I first got them. So I got them when I was about 12 or 13. They never like regulated. So I might have like a period for like a couple of months like in a row, and then they might disappear for a little bit and then they might come back again. So then when I was about 15-ish, I got like a really painful period, which was painful for me. It was like the worst one that I'd ever experienced. Like painkillers weren't helping, and basically like any position I was in, so like whether I was sitting, whether I was like laying down, it was like agony. Like hot water bottles didn't really help at all. And it was then like suggested that, you know, maybe I'd go on the pill because it can obviously help make my periods lighter, but it can also help with like pain relief. It can make your cramps not as painful. So when I was 16, I went to the doctors with my mum, and we talked about, you know, maybe going on the pill to basically regulate my periods and to help with like the pain and stuff. I knew that's what the pill would do for me. So the doctor put me on Femidine. So they put me on like the everyday one. So, you know, I'd have like the 3 weeks with like the hormones in, and then like the week with like dummy pills. But we called them like Smarties because it was just like a little sugar pill. So that obviously was the combined pill that had the estrogen and the progesterone in it. So I was on that for about 2 years, I want to say. But then whilst I was on the pill, I noticed like I'd put on probably a good couple of stone in weight. I was always fairly skinny when I was younger. So I put on a lot of weight quite quickly. My mood was, I would go through like mood swings. So then I went back to the doctors and asked if they could put me on a different one. So they put me on Microgynon. So this was another combined pill. It was just a different sort of brand. It might have been ever so slightly different, like milligrams of each hormone in them. So that didn't really help much with the mood, and it didn't really help with the weight. But then I started to gain new symptoms whilst I was on this. So I started to get like headaches or like migraines, and then I started getting chest pains. So I was only on that pill for about maybe 6 months, I think. And then at the start of December in 2015, I was watching TV with my parents in the evening, and I got like a flare-up of my chest pain again. So then I woke up in the morning and I felt worse. So I felt a bit dizzy, I felt a bit like unsteady, like on my feet. Like the pain in my chest had gone, but my heart rate, I noticed, had sort of peaked up a bit. It was a bit faster than what it should be. So I managed to phone the doctor in the morning and managed to get in like within like an hour of phoning, which was, I'm quite thankful for living in such a rural area at the time. When I was getting ready to go to the doctors, I was literally having to like grip the sink because I felt like if I didn't hold the sink, I was just going to collapse. And my mum was at work and my dad was out and I was the only one in the house. So I was like, well, if, you know, I've got to like hold on because if I don't, you know, my parents might not find me till it could be too late. And then by the time I got to the doctors and the nurse saw me, she was like, oh, you look awful. She literally said it looked as if I'd ran a marathon because I think I must have been like that flushed and like she could obviously tell that like my body just didn't look right. So she took like my blood pressure. I think my blood pressure was a bit high. She also took my heart rate because obviously she could tell that things weren't right. And I think it was at that point when she noticed my heart rate was 130 beats per minute. So they then sent me to another doctor and basically they thought that I had a blood clot on my lung, which was causing the chest pain that I'd been experiencing the night before. So he was the one who informed me that I was to go to A&E that morning. He gave me a blood thinning injection in my stomach to help with the blood clot in case anything happened. So then once I got to A&E with my mum, they checked my heart rate again, they checked my blood pressure, they put me on like an ECG before they then admitted me up to the ward, where they did all that again. They took my bloods for the first time. That was fun. I almost fainted. They also sent me for a chest x-ray as well. And then a few hours later, a doctor came and was like, well, we can't really see anything. We don't know what's causing it, but we're just going to send you home. And from that point, I was taken off the pill because they were like, that's obviously causing it. It's not doing your body any good. I came off the pill. And then before I came up to Glasgow to come to college, so this would have been probably about June 2018, I thought it'd be a good idea to maybe go back on the pill. So they tried to put me on the Yasmin pill, I think it was, which was another combined pill. And within probably a few hours of taking that, I started to get what I think they call is like a visual migraine or like an aura. So I immediately phoned up the doctors and like, this is what's happening. And she was like, okay, stop it. Don't take it. Come back into the doctors in like a couple of days. I'll get you in. And then that obviously led on to me getting a migraine. So then they were like, okay, you're not allowed the combined pill anymore. Obviously, my body can't handle the estrogen in it. So she basically wrote in my notes, like, you can only have progesterone only forms of contraception. So I've not been on any contraception since, apart from using condoms, because I'm just worried that, you know, some forms of contraception are just going to like do my body more harm than good. What do you think is the most used forms of contraception?
I assume it to be obviously condoms, but also I think the pill I think is quite popular, but not sure.
Jennifer? I would probably say the same. I mean, most people you speak to about contraception, those are usually the two answers that they give.
So, according to an article by The Guardian in March 2019, the pill is still the most prescribed form of contraception. Now, this is just talking about the types of contraception available to women, as there's obviously more choice for them than men. So the combined pill was more popular than the progesterone pill. However, there was a decrease in the number of women being prescribed the combined pill in 2017 to 2018 compared to 2015-2016. The progesterone-only pill, there was actually an increase in the amount being prescribed to women on previous years. So although the combined pill is more popular, more women were obviously getting prescribed the progesterone-only pill. It's also been revealed that many GP doctors are actually not offering women other forms of contraception that might actually be more suitable for their needs. How do you guys feel about that?
Whenever I went to the doctor about obviously getting put on the pill, my nurse gave me like a leaflet with all the different types of contraception, and she like went over what all of them did, like what one would be best for me. For me personally, the idea of like the coil or things like that just totally puts me off. Like the pill, I just find quick and easy. Set a reminder on your phone every morning, take it, job done. Like, for me, I think that's the easiest way of keeping yourself safe.
I agree. I think with what you said there about some doctors maybe not meeting the needs of their patients in terms of what they want for their contraception, I think that's quite worrying. I think it also kind of comes back to obviously everybody has a different experience. It depends on what health professional that you have. But I think there is a culture of policing women's sexuality. And when a woman comes to a doctor, anyone comes to the doctor and is looking to go on birth control, sometimes assumptions can be made, and I think there maybe is an internalised issue that comes from that comes back to education.
I agree with you on that. I feel like when I obviously went to the doctors about going on the pill, I don't really think there was any other mention of any other form of contraception for me at the time. It might have been due to my age, I don't know. But I think I'm with you on that, Jennifer, of like the pill is like quite an easy thing to take, and the idea of getting something like the implant or like the coil inserted into my body, I was a bit like, ugh, no thanks. And obviously the pill is super easy, you just take it either in the morning or at night, whatever like time suits you best, and you're done and dusted. So I think that's, in that sense, it's quite easy for like women to take that over maybe other forms. But then obviously, if you've got something inserted in your body, like you can forget about it. Like it's obviously going to still be working. You just don't have to put in really any work in order for it to work. I decided to go onto the streets of Glasgow to ask the public what they thought about this. In George Square, and as you can see, there's not that many people behind me. This is because I'm filming this in the middle of the coronavirus outbreak. So the UK is currently in lockdown. So what I decided to do instead was to ask people over on social media what their thoughts and opinions were on the questions that I put forward to them.
Also a lot more that can go wrong with the pill. So if you get put on a certain type of antibiotic and you don't know that stops the pill from working, that can happen.
I think it's not really fair because every woman's different, every woman needs different types of contraception, yet everyone's on the same one because that's all they offer. But
I feel like GPs should offer more than just the pill, especially to young girls who are just getting into that stage of their life and everything.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the topic of sex and a few things that are involved in the topic of sex. But I want to start off by talking about sex education, and I don't mean the Netflix show at this stage. I will come to that later. Now, a lot of us at some point will have received some form of sex education in schools. Probably in high school. Personally, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 lessons, if I remember rightly. I can't quite remember exactly. I think the first one covered like puberty and periods, and then the second one covered like sex and how to put a condom on like a banana or a dildo or whatever. So what was sex education lessons like in your schools?
For me, I honestly don't really remember anything beneficial from any lessons that I had like involving sex education. Like I think it was really stigmatized, especially our kind of environment. Our classroom was mainly boys over girls, so obviously like young boys talking about sex, making jokes and like things like that, like all the girls kind of just shut themselves off from it. So like me personally, I don't think my sex education was really in any way beneficial. Like it's kind of like, we'll give you this PowerPoint, do with that what you will. Like almost that's what I got from it anyway.
Sabrina?
Yeah, I completely agree. I barely remember being taught about sex in school, and I think just 1 or 2 lessons as well. I would say that sex education is so important. It can help dismantle a lot of misconceptions, a lot of different views of what sex is, what sex means. And also, I think the most important aspect of sex education that I did not have any information about is consent. I would say consent really needs to be put at the forefront of sex education, what consent is, how consent is given, and that can dismantle a lot of toxic rape culture, which is around in our lives, and I think that's super important.
And I think, you know, sex education, there needs to be more, like, you know, yes, like, we can teach you how to put a condom on, and, you know, this is what puberty is. You know, you're going to get hair in different places, and for girls, your boobs are going to grow, and for guys, your penis is going to get bigger. I don't think they really teach us everything. Like, yeah, they might say, oh, girls, you're going to get your period. But they don't really talk a huge amount about, like, how to deal with it. In that one of the lessons, they're like, okay, so there's pads and there's tampons, and sort of deal with it. And obviously now you've got like cups. They weren't really around back then. And obviously that's like coming in more popular, obviously with climate change, and they're all like, well, you know, period products, that's a lot of plastic that you're just going to throw away and it's never going to get decomposted. So like, we'll use this cup instead. I think there needs to be more and like in sex education, but I also think it needs to start a little bit earlier. I think younger kids need to get involved and understand it. So kind of like leading on from that, so according to the gov.uk website, sex education is taught to pupils from the age of 11 onwards, and schools are encouraged to teach pupils about reproduction, sexuality and sexual health. I asked the public if more should be taught in these lessons.
It's actually a lot more unsafe to not teach it in schools. So I definitely think that schools should be more proactive in talking about sex education.
I think they should explore all different types of genders, sexualities, like gay people, that kind of thing.
I would want my children to know sort of the real basics about sex education and sex, but I feel like going into too much detail at an early age could be a hindrance.
Schools should be teaching a lot more, and not just do it as a one-off. It should be more of a routinely thing.
So, you've kind of already mentioned this, but do you think that there should be more taught in sex educations, and if so, what exactly?
I think sex is such a broad topic, like there's so much. I feel like it's mostly like, if you don't know it, Google it and don't tell anyone you've Googled it. Like I feel like it's very much so like, you feel a lot of shame from like maybe not knowing things about sex. Like I think everyone kind of expects you to have like ticked all of these boxes before a certain age. So like periods, you should know about periods like before you're like 13, 14. Or like sex, everyone in high school anyway should be like, oh, you should have had sex by the age of like 17, like ridiculous things like that. There's so much stigma that everyone's almost too afraid to ask questions. Take it like the HND that we're doing just now. Like there's a list of all the topics through the year that we go over.
Yeah.
I feel like almost there should be that kind of thing for sex education. So like periods, sex, masturbation, sexuality, like there should be like a prolonged period of time where we go over everything in depth in school so that kids don't feel like they don't know enough about topics. I just think like we've had this stigma around sex since like years and years ago, and we don't need it. Like it should be kind of almost bringing like light and be like, this is a good thing, rather than kind of putting shame on people for it.
To learn about sexual issues from a preteen age is so important in sexuality as an adult, and how that person grows and how their relationships take place, how they have healthy relationships. I think definitely there should be a list of subjects to cover, because there is so many and everybody's different, everybody has different experience. Some people might not even want to have sex ever. Something that's especially important is learning about sexual health, learning about pregnancy, learning about different options within pregnancy, and that can take stigma away from that too. I think when I was in school there was lots of sort of banter about STDs and a lot of misconceptions about how they are spread, and people being labelled as dirty or unclean if they have one. So to learn about this and to learn about and also to know about to know that sex is for pleasure as well, to know that there is a pleasure aspect to sex. I think that's especially important for women.
So, as I mentioned earlier, there is a Netflix series called Sex Education, which follows the life of Otis, a socially awkward high school boy who hasn't really got much experience in the sex department. However, he has a lot of knowledge on it because his mother is a sex therapist. So Otis decides to use this knowledge and teams up with his fellow classmate Maeve, and basically they set up a sex therapy clinic at their school. Now, the Netflix series discusses a variety of different topics, and very important topics at that. So in the most recent series, they talked a little bit about sexual assault. They talk about addiction, vaginismus, gay sex, STIs, cyberbullying, and masturbation, to name a few. Sex education has taken topics that other shows might be a bit uncomfortable portraying on TV. However, they do it brilliantly. So let's watch a small clip of that here.
It's a new term. No more clinic, no more drama.
You can't give it up.
Everyone's got chlamydia.
I read that I should rub bleach on my vagina. Is that true?
I can't do dirty talk.
My cum tastes like kimchi.
Firstly, have you two watched Sex Education, and what are your opinions on the show covering these sometimes hard-hitting and embarrassing topics?
Yes, I have watched it. It's very good. I think even from the very first clip of season 1, where I'm not sure, is it Adam and his girlfriend are having sex in the room upstairs with his parents downstairs.
Yeah.
I think from the very get-go, like, even me knowing that, like, sex isn't a big issue and, like, it's something that is completely normal, like, I put it on and I thought, oh God, like, turn that down, make sure mum and dad don't hear that. Like, I think it done a really good job of kind of normalising sex, and, like, all of the topics they covered, like, they done with, like, humour, or, like, if it was really serious, like, they kind of brought light to it and were, like, made sure that everyone knew that it was, like, okay and normal, and, like, you should talk about these kind of things. I thought it was, like, a really good way of kind of almost just normalising sex and, like, everything that comes with it. So I think that's pretty good for, like, young people to watch and see, like, that this is normal.
I loved Sex Education. I thought it was super funny, really poignant at times, and very educational even to myself as somebody who feels like they're quite clued up on things. Yeah, I think it's a really important show, and a scene that really had a big effect on me was the scene in season 2 on the bus, bus scene, about how sort of all the girls united behind having this one thing in common, which is being harassed by men. And, you know, I think that scene on the bus, and it can resonate with a lot of people, a lot of women, and I think that was a really important thing to be able to see.
Yeah, I really liked Sex Education. I feel like it's a good show to educate people while also it being sort of comedy and sort of being light-hearted, so they can talk about serious topics without it being a bit too serious. So they can bring, like, the light side of it, and, you know, it gets people talking, I think. So I think for me, you know, watching Sex Education and watching all the topics, I think it's a good way of showing to women that these things happen to us on a daily basis. Like, there's so many women that will get shouted at in the street, or they'll get wolf whistled at, or there'll be things that, like, you know, in sex that they might not have consented to, or they might have consented to and then decided against that halfway through doing it. So I think that's something that needs to be shown more, and Sex Education is doing that brilliantly. I mentioned masturbation was a big topic in seasons 1 and season 2 of Sex Education, with the start of season 2 being the big scene. The first episode, Otis, loads of wanking scenes. I'm just going to put it out there. There was a lot of them. So we know that like masturbation isn't necessarily a taboo topic when it comes to men. We know that's something they will do. They will just whip it out and they'll, you know, have a few fun 5 minutes. But when it comes to women, it's not really discussed, and it's seen like a taboo topic, and it's depicted as dirty and wrong, and like women shouldn't be able to do this. They shouldn't be allowed to talk about like their own sexual pleasure. We know that like sex is obviously seen as something that's only for the guy's pleasure, and it's not usually for the women's, and sex obviously usually ends after the guy finishes. But 2 women who are trying to help end this masturbation stigma are YouTubers and content creators Hannah Witten and Melanie Murphy. Now, both Hannah and Melanie discuss sex relationships on their channels, and are even trying to change the way that sex education is taught in schools.
Not a one-size-fits-all situation out there. And also, contraception can be a really tricky subject because it's your body, it's your life. Like, these are important decisions. It is Masturbation May. I have no idea who comes up with these things or if they're real, but it's a thing. Masturbation May.
I'm very passionate about sex education, relationship chat. Sex and relationships are both very important to me, but this video is going to focus on the sex element of that interest, and we will just dive right in.
So as I mentioned earlier, we know masturbation can be seen as like a dirty topic, when in actual fact masturbation could be classified as self-care. You know, it's all about your pleasure, your fantasies, and sort of discovering like your own sexuality. You know, it allows you to explore your body and find out what you like and what you don't like during sex. And I feel like the more that you know about like your own pleasure, like the better your sex life is with a partner, because you can be like, well, I actually don't like that, but if you did it like this, you know, it would be so much better for me. So this is where it's going to get a little bit personal, but do you guys masturbate? And if so, how often do you do it? And how does it make you feel when you do it?
Yes, I do. I think everyone does. I think most women do. And I think everybody has at some point. I would say that as I've mentioned before, I've dealt with a lot of shame related to sex and sexual things, and I remember feeling really specific shame towards masturbation. I think as quite a young person, every time I did it, afterwards I was like, okay, that was the last time, I'm not doing this again. Why did I do that, you know? So I think that's very common as well, and I felt like it was only me who did it. I felt like I was some kind of weirdo. All through that time, or maybe a little bit later, I learned that boys did it, and it's very highly publicised and spoken about, and it's okay, they're men, but for a woman to do it, you know, it's got different connotations, and I always was super aware of those, and I think that I wish I had so much worry about what I was doing and what would happen if I got caught, or what effect it was having on my body, because there is so many misconceptions and misinformation about masturbation for women.
I wouldn't say that I masturbate regularly. Maybe when I was younger, like, and first discovered like, oh, what is this? This feels quite good. I maybe went through a stage where maybe it was like 2-3 times a week. I think there's always been such a stigma around it. Like, whenever I first like kind of found myself and found what I liked, what I didn't, whatever, like, I was always so stressed about like someone being in the house, or like if someone was to walk in on me, like I was like, oh, my mum's gonna disown me, like what? Like, I just always felt so nervous that I thought it just isn't worth it. Like, I enjoy this, yes, but the amount of stress that I'm feeling every time I go to do this, like, it's not, let's just not bother. Nowadays I'm much more comfortable with it. I know what I like, I know like when I need it. Like, if I'm like feeling mega stressed, I'm like kind of being a bit iffy with people, like fed up, need my own space, need my own time, then I know like it works for me. But I wouldn't say that it's something that I have to do regularly to be like in a good mood.
Like, I'll openly admit, like, obviously I do masturbate, and there's times when I'll do it like maybe a couple of times a week, maybe a little bit more if I'm feeling like a bit more horny. There'll be times when I won't have masturbated for a few weeks, and then I'll be like, oh, I haven't done that in a while, or why haven't I? And I feel like there's still bits of me that's like trying to work out like what I don't like. I've actually never orgasmed during sex at all with a guy. I've only ever done it through masturbation, so there's still bits of me that's trying to work out like, what don't I like? Because obviously something's going on during sex that's not making me get there. And then I feel like really frustrated in myself because I'm not getting there with a guy, but then I can do it like quite easily with myself. So I think there's a part of me that's still trying to figure out like, what do I like? Like, what makes me tick? What will get me over that little edge? So I quickly want to talk about virginity before we move on to the last point. So don't worry, guys, we're getting there. So we all know that, you know, we lose our virginity when you have penetrative sex. So what was your first time like, and how old were you at the time?
Well, I was 18, and it was just with my boyfriend, who I'm still with, and I think my loss of virginity was probably a lot better than the general consensus of what I've heard from my friends. I think it was because I was with somebody who I already knew, I was super fond of, and we'd already done some things other than penetration before. So I think that really helped with things. But I think what we really need to make clear is that virginity is a social construct, and it's a misogynistic one at that. You know, the whole hymen thing, it's not, your hymen can break when you're riding a bike, you know, so, or some people don't even have one when they're born. So I think that it's an inherently misogynistic idea. It's something that puts women on a pedestal or of pureness that is really damaging.
So I lost my virginity when I was 18. I was with my boyfriend, who I'm still with. I think for me, I really felt the stigma around sex. I was with my boyfriend for almost 5 months before I was ready to have sex. Obviously, like, even like the first time we had done anything sort of like oral or like touching in any kind of way, I said to him, I was like, I'm so afraid of you like leaving this room now and just not wanting anything more to do with me. Like, it was almost like a scary subject, sex, for me. It took us such a long time. Like, obviously he wasn't a virgin, so like he knew what he was doing, he knew like what he liked, what he didn't, and it took me a really long time to kind of figure out like how to kind of go about that. I remember the first time we did have sex, I cried afterwards. Like, I was like, oh god, like that's it, like I've kind of like I've lost myself, like you're not going to want me anymore. Like, I just, the stigma around it for me, like I just felt so like dirty almost having done that. Now I don't think twice. I'm like, yeah, this is a totally normal thing. Like, but definitely for me, I think if someone had kind of sat down and spoke to me and been like, this is like okay, like you're meant to kind of like, if you want to go and enjoy yourself and do this, it's fine, like don't worry about it, kind of thing. Like, I would have found it so much easier. Maybe not saying I would have went into it quicker than I did, because I felt whenever I did I was ready, but I think I wouldn't have felt so much pressure surrounding it if I had kind of spoke to someone about it and like realised that it's a totally healthy thing to do.
So I was actually 21 when I lost mine, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, like growing up through like my teens, and obviously the stigma of everybody else around me, they were like, oh well, like we're having sex and all this, and I was just like, sex didn't really appeal to me back then. It was something that I was like a bit nervous about, I was a bit unsure about. I was like, I don't want anything to do with that. And then I started to get a bit more like comfortable like around the topic of just even talking about sex like with my friends and stuff. And then coming to college, you know, I met a lot of different people, and people that I wouldn't necessarily have met like where I used to live. I actually didn't really regret waiting this long because I wasn't ready to have sex before. So the guy I lost my virginity to, we actually had tried like a couple of months previous. We were going to have sex, but when it actually came round to it, I like panicked, I freaked out. I was like, no, this isn't happening. And then it took me a couple of months, and then I felt comfortable like in doing it. But then as soon as I'd done it, I was like, do I look different? Like, do I feel different? Because I feel like there's a stigma and sort of discussion about like when you have like sex for the first time, like people think that they can tell that you've had it. So like going back to the flat and like seeing all like my flatmates, I was thinking, do they know that I've just had sex? And I did it like just before I went home for Christmas, and obviously seeing all of my family, so I was like worrying. I was like, does my mum realize, like does my mum can my mum tell like I've had it? Can anybody else tell that I've done it? So I think that was like a slight worry for me, but like no one said anything, so I don't think they could. And obviously like now like I'm a lot more comfortable with it. Like I'm fine with it, obviously. I wouldn't be having sex if I wasn't comfortable with it. So I think like virginity is such like a big thing that like we obviously talk about like in school. And I just feel like there needs to like break down the stigma a bit. Like, yes, you don't have to have like sex as soon as like you're of the age and consent to do it. Like you can wait a few years, like wait until it feels right for you. Like don't feel pressured into having sex just because everybody around you is doing it. And I feel like that was something like at high school, you know, there were so many people having sex and they were talking about sex like really, really openly. But at the same time, it was like, there's probably other people out there who haven't had sex and they don't feel comfortable talking about it, and they probably feel pressured in by society or just even their friends, like they should be having sex because they're a certain age. This is what you should be doing. Like you can be any age. Like there's probably people even older than me who still haven't had sex because like either it's a religious thing and they're waiting until marriage, or it's just a thing of they just haven't found the right person. They want to wait for the right person to lose their virginity to, and they don't want it to just be like a random guy that they've pulled in the club. There will be the people that are like, oh, I just want to wait a little bit. Like I'm not quite comfortable to do that just yet. But I feel like there's so many things that girls worry about. So a lot of people tell like young girls, oh, sex is going to be painful. Like you mentioned like the hymen. Some people have it, some people don't. Like if they have it, it might break when they're riding a bike, or it might break when they put a tampon in for the first time, or when they masturbate with their fingers. Like it might be a little bit uncomfortable, like to begin with, and it might be like a little bit sore, but if it is, just try and relax a bit. You know, you can use lube. Like there's nothing wrong with using a little bit of lube if it's uncomfortable. If that's what helps it make it feel more comfortable, then I guess like you got to do what you got to do. The last topic we're going to be talking about is body image and body confidence. So we all know like body image and body confidence is something that's literally thrown in our faces every single day. It's in all the magazines that we see, it's online, it's on Instagram, and we keep sort of getting told that if we don't look a certain way, if we don't look like a supermodel and we're like a size 0, then we aren't pretty, we aren't beautiful, we aren't good enough for anybody. And like a lot of women in the media kind of get put down because of how they look. It could be like their hair color, their skin tone, their height, their weight. So has anyone ever commented on any of like your posts on Facebook or Instagram negatively about your body?
No, luckily, they haven't. And I think it would, even though I imagine I would kind of shrug it off, I think it would really affect me. I do struggle with my body image, and sometimes I feel super confident actually, and then sometimes I struggle with leaving the house. I think the body positive movement, which is mainly based on social media, has really helped me. Seeing plus size models on the runway has really helped me, see myself in a different light, and also I do feel a kind of pressure from the body positive movement to really like myself, love myself, which can be difficult as well as a positive, because I think sometimes it's okay to be like, I don't like my body just now. Maybe there is societal factors constituting to that. Maybe it's because I want to shop at a specific shop and they don't do my size. So I do feel a lot of pressure to, when I post on Instagram, to be really, really sort of fake confidence in a way. When sometimes when I'm posting it, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't really like this. And I think that the body, I think what I kind of aim for is body neutrality. The fact that we all have a body, some of our bodies are different. Maybe there's different health factors, life factors that constitute towards that, but it's just our body. You don't comment on people's bodies. It's how they get around in the world. So that's kind of what I like to keep in my head when I look in the mirror. This is just my body.
I think I still, in myself, struggle with body image. There'll be days where like it takes me hours and hours to find an outfit that I think, okay, like that looks fine, or like say I'm going to the gym, like, oh, I can't wear a sports bra, I need to wear like a baggy t-shirt because there'll be girls there with six packs that look amazing and I'm here a wee chub trying to get my workout done. Especially like because my boyfriend works away, I kind of said to him when he was going away, I was like, oh, when you come back, like I'll have been to the gym, I'll have ate good, like I'll be like a supermodel. And it wasn't really until he turned around and he was like, look, like you realise that you're only doing this for yourself. He was like, I don't care, like, not I don't care how you look, he was like, I love you the way you are, like you don't need to change, like if you want to do this to make yourself happy, by all means do it, but do it for you, don't do it for anyone else. Like I think it wasn't up until then I was like, oh, like maybe people do think that I look okay, or like that I do look attractive or whatever, and I think it takes you a really long time to kind of be able to accept the fact that people find you attractive. Like that sounds really bad, but like for years and years I've struggled with my weight, and like I've always felt really heavy, and out of my friends I've always been the heaviest, and like taking pictures you're like, oh god, everyone looks amazing apart from me, do you know what I mean? Like I think confidence is like takes such a long time to build up, and I think I'm only just now getting to the point where I can take a picture and think, oh well, I look a bit chubby, but that's okay, like it's just who I am and that's fine, and you don't care what other people think of it. I think that's where I'm slowly getting to, but I still think you have good days and bad days.
Definitely. So I hope you have enjoyed watching this and have taken something different from it. Everyone's periods will be different to yours, and everyone experiences it differently. Contraception has its benefits but also has its negative impact on your body, both physically and mentally. Masturbation should be seen as something which is beneficial to your health and your sex life. And lastly, love the way your body looks. It does so much for us, and like one thing we can do in return is to love it for how it looks and what it does for us. It keeps us alive. I want to thank our guests, Sabrina and Jennifer, for being such wonderful guests and for willing to share their stories and experiences with me. Sabrina actually has her own magazine, so if you want to check that out, I will leave links to that down below. She's always looking out for people to write content for her. So if that is something that appeals to you, check the links below to see how you can contribute to that. Thank you again for watching. Please let me know what you think of this series. I will leave links to the other episodes for the series down below in the description. That's all from me. Bye!